Maps of New Mexico are extremely important to us because it provides a nice snapshot of the state at a particular period of time. And it gives us insights into history that we can't get someplace else. Every sequent culture that comes through creates another map. And so you're looking at layers, historic layers of maps. A lot of the early maps are Native American maps, establishing their territory. So the earliest maps that were here are very simple. And sometimes I think that's the best kind of map that you can have. It's a creativity. Basically, it provides you a great chance, opportunity to have history that can be recorded in a creative manner. If we look at Pacheco y Miera, the maps done by the Spanish explorer, came up with the Camino Real. You get actually buildings and figures, you get pueblos. It's not just little dots on the map or lines on the map. So the map can be any sort of creativity that you want to put into it. What's important about the Spanish colonial period, and in terms of cartography, is that these were really the first maps of the area of New Mexico. Pacheco y Miera is the first visual that we have of the Spanish moving north from Mexico into New Mexico. It shows you what's along the river, the importance of the Rio Grande as a settlement site. It's a map that we often call visual interpretation. You're not working with location. There's no aerials, photographs to work from, and so therefore it's inaccurate in terms of locations, but it provides a great deal of information. He had to somehow walk the area, had to observe the area, and so therefore he actually did visually see if it's a plateau or it's a sharp peak, and that's what he put on the map. We had no boundaries out here in the West for a long period of time until about 1817, which is pretty young. And so during that period of time, this was unoccupied land. And I've seen lots of maps that show Santa Fe up here as a little isolated little thing, and like little dots up there on the screen somewhere, and that's how remote Santa Fe was. Or as de Vargas said when he came here, remote beyond compare. After we defeated Mexico, somebody had to say there's got to be a boundary now between Mexico and the United States. And so that was one of the first boundaries. The first line that we had was done by a military person called Desternell, and he was the one who mismapped where El Paso was. So El Paso was 100 miles south and 40 miles west of where it is now. And so essentially it was an extreme era. I have great sympathy for the poor guys who were surveying in those days. First of all, they had Native American problems they had to handle. They also were in hazardous areas that they'd never been in before. And on top of that, in the evening, under a Latin lantern or something, they were trying to recording down what they had seen that day. And if you can imagine, I'm trying to record a river, a stream, and I have no idea. I didn't follow the entire stream. I didn't follow the entire mountain, yet I'm putting it on the map. Okay, so sometimes things would be done by hearsay. The next boundary was with who's the next threat. Texas had gained independence in 1845, and Texas was a republic. And so Texas had a claim to the land, to the west of what we see of Texas today. And a part of that land right, basically there was a resolution. $15 million were supposed to have been given to Texas to quit claim to the land. And so 103 degrees west longitude then became the boundary between New Mexico and Texas. When they accepted the claim of land, they gave up the claim that they initially had was to the Rio Grande. And so if you look at that, then the irony of all this stuff is that where was Albuquerque located? Where was Las Cruces located? Where was El Paso located? They were all east of the river. And if you're aware of that, it means that they would have all been in Texas. But we had a survey problem with that. And the survey problem was that somewhere over in DC, there's a meridian that we're supposed to be mapping from. They used the wrong meridian. So therefore, the line, which is supposed to be very simple, north and south, was based off of this meridian, which is 2.5 miles short. So therefore, the whole boundary, eastern boundary of New Mexico, is short by a couple miles. In southwestern New Mexico, there's this large appendage called the Gadsden Purchase. And the reason for that was Guadalupe Pass, so that we would have a route to California. We couldn't go north. The north route was really cut off. The Rocky Mountains were not easy to cross. So this is south of the Rocky Mountains and by far the easiest way to get to California. It became initially then a railroad route. And so the northern boundary then comes across the southern area of Colorado. And a guy by the name of Darling surveyed that. If you're familiar today with southern Colorado, what's there, this is gold and silver country, and they knew about that very early before they started surveying the land. And so therefore you had all kinds, you had New Mexicans trying to get, acquiring some of that land, you had Coloradans trying to acquire those lands. And so it looked to me like it was a saw blade. One map I saw basically went up, came down, went up, and came down. You had great debates that went on in Washington, D.C. In other words, the Supreme Court had to make a decision on the land along the border. So finally, in 1929, they got so tired of debating this that they finally just resolved it and said, we're going to settle on the first boundary that came in. And so they went by the Darling boundary, which was the 37th parallel. The western border, Arizona border, came about because of General Carleton during the Civil War. He was bringing the California Column over to support New Mexico in its fight against the Confederacy. And as he was coming across from Yuma, you think of where Yuma is, the government center for Yuma was Santa Fe. And he realized right then you can't have a government center out here in the middle of nowhere. So therefore, he was very instrumental in saying, we got to split this state. So he was the one that then came up with the designation of 106 degrees west longitude as the boundary between Arizona and New Mexico. By the 1880s, we pretty well had our state defined. Even if they were inaccurate, we had at least 4 or 5 borders that worked well, and we were accepting those. Boundaries really reflect a lot of changes that occurred in New Mexico over a period of time. Not just simply the population change that occurred, but also the greed, the drive for more land, and everybody's trying to get a piece of the action. The story of our boundaries is a better way to understand the 400 years of history that we've had here in New Mexico.